Welcome back to Channel 9 Live at Microsoft Ignite. I'm Sonia Cuff, and I'm thrilled to have Technical Fellow Jeffrey Snover with me. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Howdy, great to see you again.
So we're going to take a less technical topic this time, but I know it's one that
Okay.
really resonates in our communities. Our tools and our technologies are constantly changing. So how are we supposed to keep up, both with the product announcements from Microsoft and with the broader concepts across our industry?
Yeah, so first let's just acknowledge it's hard. It is absolutely hard, and it's also necessary. And here's the thing, that is what I call our tribe. We are the tribe of innovation. We are the tribe. We have chosen to walk over this rocky ground that always causes us, some discomfort, right? We learn something, we we master our skills, and as soon as it seems we've mastered them, it's like knock, 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 time to learn the next set.
Yeah.
And it is difficult, so it's worth acknowledging, but it's also worth acknowledging that it is required. I like to joke that, if you wanted to get into a business where you didn't have to learn anything, or, if you were not interested in continual lifelong learning, you should get into lumber. My best friend's in the lumber industry, and, he learned his business, and that took an effort, but now he spends his nights and the weekends with his family because there hasn't been a new tree invented in years. So then how do you do it? So first is just acknowledge it's uncomfortable and it's difficult. And some years it's easier to get into it than others. But what I suggest is, sort of the philosophy embodied by Don Jones's book, PowerShell in a Month of Lunches.
Absolutely.
You take a little bit of time on a continual basis. Don't stop and say, oh, well, I'm going to learn Azure next week. No, you're not going to learn Azure next week. That is not going to happen. But what you do is you say, well, I'm going to learn a little bit more about Azure today, and then tomorrow, and then the next day. And so you want to allocate, like go into your calendar and allocate a small amount of time, at least 15 minutes. Half an hour is better. An hour would be great. If you could spend an hour a day, I'm telling you, you're doing great. But you just dedicate a certain amount of time that says, no matter how busy I am with this, or this, I'm going to take a portion of time and learn something. And I think that's the best way to go through it, because otherwise it can be daunting. It's daunting to me. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's that eating that elephant one bite at a time.
One
right?
bite at a time.
Yeah,
Yes, my favorite.
So look, some of these changes can be viewed as threats by some people. I mean, traditional infrastructure engineers are losing access to the physical servers that we like to hug, and application developers are seeing people going off and buying software as a service applications that they don't build. So what would you say to someone who's worried that these changes mean that they're going to be out of a job?
Yeah, so there's out of a set of tasks and out of a job. Those are two very different things.
Okay.
The tasks have always changed. I mean, I like to tell the story of, remember back when, I don't know if you've been in the business long enough to remember the painful days of trying to get a CD-ROM connected up to a desktop machine and the bent paper clips and the dip switches and the tiers, right? IT pros were running around doing all that. And then, well, when plug and play came around, the IT industry did not experience a bunch of, job loss, right? A bunch of IT bros underneath a bridge drinking, whiskey or wine. That was not the case. It's like, hey, throw your bent paper clip away. We just plug this thing in. But now, you know what? I got so many of these things. We need to figure out how to configure those. We need to figure out how to keep those up to date. And so every time we go forward, the tasks go away, but the job doesn't. So that's going to be the same, but it's back to that why you have to continually learn, because indeed, we are an industry of continual progress, of continual amplification. Whatever you're doing today is the opportunity for someone to come in and say, hey, I can automate that or make that problem go away. But there's a conservation of there's a conservation of messed up, It is true, though, right? Whenever you find it's so funny. My wife always says, how's your software? Broken, right? No, there's always some conservation of messed up. But what's interesting is whatever's sort of not messed up, whatever's hard or difficult, whatever, it is always a constant amount, but what it's doing is higher, right? So it used to be painful as all heck to now get some CD-ROM attached to a single PC, and now it's like, oh darn, well, what was so difficult? Oh, I got these 400 containers, and that's doing this machine learning, and it's not as easy as it should be. It's like, dude, you just 400 containers, machine learning, what? So anyway, so there will be a continual level of frustration, a continual level of like, darn it, a continual level of learning, but what you're doing it on continues to increase.
It's going to be really interesting to see how funny our stories of our challenges now sound to the next generation and the generation after that of IT pros, and who knows what kind of world that they'll be in, and we'll go, I remember when containers first came in and it was really hard to manage them. And
it's all screwed up. That quantum computer, it warms up, and then I got qubit, goes from a this to a that, and like, yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. So let's talk for a minute about the separation of skills between software developers and IT pros.
Yeah.
Now, they traditionally might have been very different skill sets, but now it seems to all be kind of merging together a little bit more. What do you think we can learn from each other in those different disciplines?
Yeah, so I definitely believe that is the case, and I think the answer is, at the end of the day, by the way, can I take a small
Go, please.
So basically, when people talk about DevOps, there's lots. DevOps is this, DevOps is that, DevOps is this. In my mind, DevOps is really two things, right? Number one is it's do your work in small batches very frequently. And then two is stop being a butthead to your coworker, right? That is to say, in the past, really, we talked about the wall between devs and operations, and breaking down the wall and working together. And really, that's, I think, the key gestalt of DevOps is, hey, we're in this together. Let's learn from each other to figure out how to achieve a common goal. Like, what do you bring to the picture? Oh, developer. So you don't just click a mouse, a GUI all the time. What is it? You have some processes, a CI/CD pipeline. Oh, maybe I should do that with operations. Maybe I should do my infrastructure as code. And when I do my infrastructure versus code versus 500 mouse clicks, well, it turns out that when you need new infrastructure in the weekend, you don't have to call me. You can just run my code and get what you want. And that's nice because I like spending my weekends with my family. So yay. And then when I put it in code, then I can realize that, this step here is taking a lot of time. Maybe I can optimize that. Whereas with mouse clicks, it's hard to do that. Yeah. So, I think that's one set of learnings. But a lot of people kind of focus in on that. I will say that there's the other direction as well. And that is from operations, it's you mean the thing had to work? Oh, you mean there's some ramification, there's some negative effect if I make a change and then require the service to go down? You mean that's not acceptable? Oh, I did a schema change, so, shut everything down, change all the data for a weekend? What do you mean that's a problem? So, here's my theory on this thing, that there are two really kind of centers of, excellence or gestalt, and that they will come closer and closer and they'll share. But I really do see them as being distinct and different and in some ways separate for a while. Some people believe that operations will go away and it'll all be developers. These are what we call the no-ops people. I don't think so. I think maybe you might find some specialized applications that fit into that, but most of the people we talk to will have both of them. Now let's step back. What is an organization? Theory of organization. Theory of an organization says it is a collection of people. Theory of a team. Theory of a team is an organization of people, a structure that allows their strengths to be amplified and their weaknesses to be compensated for. So the key thing is, you don't hire people, you don't promote people based upon their lack of weakness. You promote them and hire them based upon their strengths. Sure. And then what you want to do is you want to have a structure that says, hey, I can amplify that strength, highlight it, and then their weakness, how am I going to address that? I don't want to focus you on making your weakness go away. It can't be something that gets you, fired or anything like that. But other than that, what's the structure? And so my point is that developers, what's the fire in their belly? Their fire in their belly is passionate around code, right? Writing code, developing features. IT pros, what's their passion? Their passion's around keeping things running. The customer, reliability.
Yeah, security, all those
Yeah,
things,
very
right.
few developers I know are like, oh, let me tell you how I'm so passionate about fitting into a budget. Like, that matters so much to me. And yet there are people who are that, and they're super, super, super important. So in the end, I think there are these passions, and I think that they will continue to be different teams. Now, what we call people will change. There's this very interesting conversation. In fact, we should grab some coffee, and you can educate me on your view of it, is, well, what is really the difference between SRE and DevOps?
Sure.
And, is that more dev than DevOps and operations, et cetera? So that's my view.
I think it's a great approach, though, in terms of having those conversations between teams and learning from each other, because there certainly are specific traits and disciplines that'll benefit each other instead of going, oh, you don't do what I do, so there's no synergies here at all.
Yeah, I have that, I thank heavens we have teams, but I have such glaring weaknesses, but I also have strengths. So my partnership with my development manager, this guy's awesome, and he focuses in on the details, and, I talk to him, and he can tell me, oh, last night, this, and this, and, Adam's working on that, and Laura's working on this, and all these details, and then next week, this is going to happen, and the month after that, mastery over the details.
Right.
And I just look at him and just sheer amazement. I can't remember the names of my children, right? It's like, that's why it's son, come here. But my strength is my inability to deal with those details forces me to look at the bigger picture.
Yep.
Like, hey, what really matters here? Like, I hear it, but what really matters? And then, hey, you know what? In that sea of chaos, I think we're missing something. We need to be focused here. We need to accomplish this goal in this time period, or bad things are going to happen. And so that complementary skill set is great.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. And look, it's really easy to get all excited about the new announcements at a conference like this here at Microsoft Ignite this week, but sometimes you get back to the office and you get stuck, you get caught up in all that day-to-day stuff. So what advice would you give for people about what to do after the conference when they get back to the office to really help make them successful to implement positive change in their organization?
Yeah, that's the elastic band theory, right? You stretch it back, and then it goes back to where it was.
Right.
And it is one of the biggest challenges. And that's why whenever I give my talks, I like to do that next double click and turn it into something actionable.
Right.
Okay? So there's a couple techniques for them. Whether it's a personal change or an organizational change, one of the best structures you can have, it's one thing to say, oh, we should do X. Often those things are very inspirational, and you can keep them in mind for a period of time, but then you get overcome by events and goes away.
Yeah, life happens.
So one of the best structures for implementing change is a framework called when-then. So when something happens, then do this, right? So when I see a gorgeous looking cheesecake, then I increase my pace and walk right past it, okay? And that's much more helpful than thinking, don't eat cheesecake, don't eat cheesecake, don't eat cheesecake. When I see it, walk away, okay? So these when-thens are very helpful. So when I do something. By the way, this is, what I just described is called serverless computing, right? That is the architecture of serverless computing. When some event happens, then do this.
Awesome.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you want to set up a set of when-thens, okay? So when I've just learned something, like, okay, so I just talked about PowerShell. Oh, so when I need to do something, and it's something I'm going to have to do week after week, then stop, allocate some time, and turn that into an automated task. When I next have lunch, then I'm going to go tee up some Channel 9 videos to watch while I'm eating my lunch. So the series of triggers and actions are the best way to go about affecting change. And as you said it so eloquently, how do you eat an elephant? Mm-hmm. One bite at a time. And now we'll go back to physics,
Sure.
right? My background's physics. the coefficient of dynamic friction is far slower than the coefficient of static friction, which means to say if that thing's stuck, it's going to be hard to move. But once it's moving, it's pretty easy. So the point is, even making a small change is critical. A small change, don't try and big bang it. Next week I'm going to change everything to Azure. Don't do that. It's not going to succeed, and then you're going to get frustrated, and then you're going to end up nowhere, and we're going to have the same conversation next year. So pick small goals. Small goals. I'm going to do something. I'm going to start. I'm going to spend 15 minutes learning about functions. Then I'm going to spend half an hour writing a function next day. Next day, hey, I'm going to connect that thing up with an event, and I'm going to fire it. Step by step. You learn, you move forward, it makes it easier to do the next step and the next step and the next step. And one step at a time, that elephant will be eaten.
That's great. And look, I know I had some great discussions with a user adoption group about getting used to that friction and sometimes even finding an increase in the friction, because when you're trying to do something for the first time, it takes you longer.
Yes.
And working through that frustration, like putting up with the roadworks that are happening on the highway and having to slow down, but knowing that when they're completed, now you've gone from 1 lane to 3 lanes and life is going to be smoother, but we've just got to get past the roadworks.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed, I'm taking a management training course.
Yeah.
And what you learn is the most important person to manage is yourself. And it's also the hardest person to manage. So when you do these things, when you start to make these changes, you start to learn a new technology, you start to learn a new feature, then you get frustrated and you think badly of yourself. Push through that crap. Embrace it, do it, and on the other side, you'll have accomplished something, and you'll feel better about yourself, and you'll be more valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Jeffrey. Stay tuned here for Channel 9 Live at Microsoft Ignite.